Hello, and welcome again to the Leverage Podcast. And I'm Paul Richard, and we have a special guest today, Alex Huntington from Breathwork. Well, I'm so excited to have you on with us, Alex. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hey, give us a little background about you and how you got started in this business so that we get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, so I'm a dad, first and foremost. My wife and I, our 20th anniversary is in 2 days. We
Yay,
have,
congratulations.
thank you, thank you. Yeah, we've got 8 kids, seven living. And 2 years ago, we had baby number eight. He lived 3 weeks. He had trisomy 13. It's a rare genetic condition that we had never heard of. But when I was dating my wife before we got married, I told her that I would do whatever I had to do to make it possible for her to be a stay-at-home mom if she wanted to be. And so the whole time that we've been married, I've been doing door-to-door sales, which I don't know if you've ever sold anything door to door, but that is a very high stress career. I had to many years. I had to wake up and give myself a pep talk every day just to get psyched up enough to get out to work because I hated my job. I couldn't stand it, and put myself into a state where I was deeply depressed, really unhappy, and just I was not loving life. And so I learned about some techniques, some breath work techniques, meditation, things like that that made a dramatic and drastic change for us. So I realized this last year that that's kind of what I wanted to move into, the direction I'm moving into. So I started Essential Breathwork so I could teach other people what I
Very
learned.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, so give us a little insight. If I knew nothing about it, which I honestly do not, how would you describe what you do for breath work? What is that, or how you do breath work?
Yeah. So breathwork is actually just a part of it. Meditation is a big part as well. And then I like to call it futurescaping. Basically, it's planning out who you want to be in the future. See, so many people, they think about what they want to have. And they say, if I want to have XYZ result, then I need to do a certain thing. And then when I do this thing, I'll have that result and then I'll be happy. For most people, it's either have, do, be, or do, have, be, right? And I realized that that's not the formula for success. The formula for success is first you need to be happy. And it's hard when you're caught in the rat race and you're struggling to reach your goals, whatever they are. It's hard to focus on being happy. But unless you become happy now, your likelihood of hitting your goal is really low. And even if you do hit your goal, this happens all the time. You see famous people, people who have all the money in the world, they've got all the fame in the world, and what happens? They're unhappy, they're miserable, and then they kill themselves. Like you've seen it with famous actors and things all the time, right? Like people who would give anything to trade their situation for these famous people, and they're so unhappy that they're taking their own lives. So the formula for success is really you have to be happy then, and not just happy, but become the person that you want to be, right? You have to be that person, embody that person. And as you embody that person, you'll start to do the things that that type of person does, and naturally the consequence is you'll have the results that that person has. But this time you'll actually be happy, not only at the end, but throughout the whole process. So,
Okay,
futurescaping,
got it.
breath work, meditation, all of that, I fuse a bunch of different modalities and things that I've learned throughout the years to help me make those changes now to where I can be the person I want to be now, start doing the things that that person does, and start having those results, if that makes sense.
So if someone, it does. Now, give us an example of the characterization of somebody that comes to you and would like to engage you in your services. Can you give us kind of a profile of what that looks like typically, or if there is one?
Yeah, well, so I just started the business not long ago, and I'm still kind of working on that a little bit. But ideally, it's people who are struggling to achieve their goals and who have tried, throughout my years doing door-to-door sales, you read a lot of personal development, you read a lot of goal achievement literature and that kind of stuff, and all of that is good information. But I noticed for me and for a lot of people as well, they make the effort to reach their goals, and then they just fall short, and then they give up and they quit. And the cynical ones where it is really sad is where people think, oh, that stuff doesn't work. So then they just give up on goal setting altogether. and they're just like, I'm just going to live life as it comes, and so they kind of wander and never have that sense of direction anymore. So really, it's about people who want to achieve at a very high level.
Okay. So if you have somebody that is, like you said, they're making money, they really, but they know there's a missing element, right, to their happiness in that. Where do you start with them? How do you do like an intake, like an intake interview, or how does that work?
Yeah, find out where they're struggling, like what is it that they're wanting to accomplish, find out a little bit about them, but then really the techniques that we develop that I work with are designed to take anybody no matter where they are and help them become clear on what it is that they want to who they want to become, like the type of person that they want to become, and then provides them the tools that they need to change their state, to break their habits. Most of us, where we are now is a result of the experiences that we've had in the past. And if we don't inject some change, some conscious change in there, who we become in the future is going to be who we were in the past. Like we're just going to keep repeating that cycle. And so the techniques that I use are designed to help them change their state. Most people are living way too much in their sympathetic nervous system. Do you know much about the nervous system? Sympathetic, parasympathetic, all that?
Somewhat, but I think give us some clarity on that. Tell us a little bit about the difference between the two and how that operates.
So sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight or freeze, right? That's where you have some external danger. I think back to the days when people were hunter gatherers, right? And you're out on this hunting trip and all of a sudden you see this mountain lion or this bear. Instantly your brain shifts and you have a huge release of cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine. Your blood mobilizes to your limbs, your arms, your hands, your feet, your legs. So you are ready in an instant to fight that bear off or to freeze, play dead, or to run away, right? Our brain doesn't like, we don't know when we have a stressful situation at work or in a relationship or driving down the road, someone cuts you off. All of a sudden, you trigger that sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight nervous system, and to your brain, it doesn't matter if it's something that logically you can think about and say, "Hey, this is not a big deal." To your brain, it is a big deal, and you're going to release those chemicals in your body, and so you go into fight or flight or freeze. You go into your sympathetic nervous system. What's interesting about humans is that when we think about a past experience, my wife, for example, my father-in-law passed away back in 2021, and anytime that she thinks about his passing away, if she hasn't processed it properly and actually gone through the steps to grieve and all of that stuff, whenever she thinks about that, she's going to feel the exact same emotions. She's going to feel the same sadness and fear and everything else. And that's true for regardless, whatever the situation is. As we think about those past events, we relive them emotionally. Well, what is an emotion? It's a chemical reaction in your brain, right? And it changes your physiology. And so many people get stuck in this sympathetic nervous system. And there's things that now, like social media, AI, all of the programming we have on television, and all of these different resources, they are designed to trigger these responses because that's how they get more interaction with us, right? I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma about social
No.
media and the problems with that. Yeah, these algorithms, they're designed to, when you look at an image or you think, they're designed to shape the way we think. And so we're nowadays more than ever, more and more people are living in this constant state of fight or flight. That's your sympathetic nervous system. Now, your parasympathetic nervous system, that is the rest and digest, the recover. And that's where healing happens. That's where, when we're trying to work on any of our goals or ideas, if we can get in that parasympathetic nervous system, we're going to have more ideas. It's kind of like, have you ever put on like a pair of those Ray-Ban sunglasses or whatever, where they're like a yellow lens? And when you look
Yes.
at everything, everything looks yellow, right? Everything has this yellow tint to it. Well, when you're in your sympathetic nervous system and you're in constant fight or flight or freeze, it's literally putting a different lens. Like they've done tests in your pupils dilate more because you're seeing things differently. The outer worlds become so real because you're focused on threats. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're focused on threats and you're focused on survival, you're not you're not going to be creative. You're not going to be thinking about what's the best way to achieve this goal. The methodology that I employ is designed to help people break out of the sympathetic nervous system, get back into the parasympathetic nervous system so that they can actually embody who they're supposed to be, who they want to be. Does that make sense?
It does. Well, when somebody comes to you and says, I really am at a point in my life where I don't know what my future should look like. How would you counsel them at that point to rediscover maybe their calling, or I don't know if you call it a calling, or their future, whatever you want to say. How would you counsel them?
So a good place to start is through breath work. And the breath work, I have a couple different modalities that I've fused together. So Wim Hof, do you know who Wim Hof is? Have you heard of him? The
No,
Iceman?
is that a person? Yeah, no,
Yeah, this guy, he's he's
no,
he's done so much. There have been so many studies done with him where he's shown like he's got packed in a box of ice basically for over an hour, and he swallowed this little thermometer so he could tell his internal body temperature, and they had temperatures hooked up to his skin. His skin temperature dropped down
yeah,
like he was freezing, and his internal body temperature dropped down over 10 degrees. So he went down to 88 degrees. Now that's hypothermia, and the science books before he had shown that this was possible, said that if your body temperature dropped 10 degrees and you did not have some external source of heat, you were you would never recover and you would die. And his body temperature dropped down to 88 degrees, and then he raised it back up to 94 degrees. He raised it 6 degrees up while still in the ice by doing like his Wim Hof has rewritten science books as far as what the human body is capable of. His breathing technique is very, very strenuous. It's you hyperventilate intentionally for 30 rounds, and then you hold your breath out. After that 30th breath, you breathe out and you don't breathe in for as long as you feel comfortable. One of the big things about this is to not strain yourself or push yourself beyond what you're able to do. You don't want to overstress your body. This
yeah.
morning I did 6 rounds of this breath work. My average retention phase was 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So there's times where I got over 3 minutes on a few of those where I have no air in my lungs and I'm holding my breath out for over 3 minutes. Physiologically, what happens when you're doing that hyperventilation stage, you're breathing out a ton of CO2, way more than normal. So your balance in your body shifts and you become more alkaline. You're breathing out acid, the CO2, so your blood becomes more alkaline, and you're putting yourself into a deeper sympathetic state at that point. When you're hyperventilating, you're not relaxing. You're really like pushing you're straining your body. It's a hormetic stress. And then when the breath work comes, when you go into that retention phase, you're shifting and you're activating the parasympathetic. So you're starting to get this balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So for someone who is in, like you described, where they don't know what they want to do, they have no idea, like they're at this point where they're just lost. This breath work is a really good tool to help them to get out of that sympathetic nervous system and into that parasympathetic, where they can actually start to think. And it's like taking off the Ray-Bans, and all of a sudden, instead of everything looking yellow or everything looking like panic, all of a sudden they can start to see things as they really are, and they can start to take control of their programming again and their what it is that they want to accomplish and what they want to be.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I just brought up Wim Hof's method on Facebook, or at least his Facebook page to follow. So very interested to see that. I actually have heard that, and this is one of our keynote speakers I mentioned coming in for our conference in November, that Secrets in Healthcare, Dr. Brian Artis, and he talks about the fact that actually if you have a fever, this is on the opposite side, I guess. If you have a fever of 104, don't worry about it.
That's right.
That's your body fighting off, the whatever it is, the infection, whatever's going on in your system, and so we get, we're in the emergency room if we're at one, that type thing. And that's just a natural body. So you almost have to step back and say, we need to think about our bodies differently. It's such a complex machine to begin with, right? And so whether you're doing nutrition or you're doing exercise or you're doing, whatever type of things like the breath work side of things, et cetera, our preconceived notions from our allopathic training a lot of that you got to throw it in the dumpster. And it's just a bunch of garbage. Low salt diets and all these other things are things that we've been trained. If fat's bad, all these things, we're a lot of us are waking up to the fact that that's not the case. It's not the way it works, guys. In
Do
fact,
you know,
that's to your
incidentally,
detriment, right?
do you know one of the first things that they do if you go into, like, my wife, she had preeclampsia with this last pregnancy. Her blood pressure was 199 over 127. That's like extremely high blood pressure. You know what the first thing that they did
Wow.
when
Yeah,
she went into
yeah.
the hospital?
Give her a bag of salt water. Bigger a
They
bag
put
of
her on a
salt water.
magnesium sulfate drip. Yeah, they pumped her full of salt. Yeah, salt doesn't. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of things like that in our medical system now, where it's all about like avoid discomfort. Your body, you need stress. You need you need to have it, but you need it in the right balance. And what's crazy is the more we seek comfort, the worse it is for our body, and the longer we get into this chronic stress. Whereas the more we intentionally stress, I mean, that's what exercise does, right? When you're doing a heavy curl, you're tearing your muscles. Like you're actually tearing those muscle fibers and then they grow back stronger, right? Like you need to stress your body
Yes.
out and you need to do it intentionally. So if not, you're going to get a really bad form of stress, the chronic kind that does not serve you.
Yes, yes. In fact, I was recently this would be interesting. I don't think I've shared this with you. I was on a cruise last week or a week before last actually, and talking to a gentleman, and turns out he's an MIT electrical engineering grad in his I'd say early 60s, maybe late 50s, and he is one third owner of what I was told the largest hyperbaric chamber company in the world. Okay.
Okay.
And you have some knowledge of hyperbaric chambers, yes?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, and he's the engineer. There's I think a finance guy, and the other partner is a naturopathic doctor. And anyway, long story short is a lot of the things that they're able to do with hyperbaric chambers is amazing to how the body responds to additional oxygen and additional atmospheric pressure healing that can take place is quite incredible, and so just from what you're talking about, and I maybe we can get into the breathing methodology here in a minute. Yet you realize that most of us don't breathe properly to begin with, and you're robbing yourself of a lot of benefits by doing that. So maybe just go into breath work. What methodologies do you use? What are the benefits? And maybe touch on those things if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, the Wim Hof breath work, that really aggressive hyperventilation. It's interesting because the other guy that I really like to his modalities that I really like is Patrick McEwen. He's the author of The Oxygen Advantage and the Breathing Cure. And what's funny is he doesn't like the Wim Hof method. He learned the Buteyko, Constantine Buteyko was a doctor. He talks a lot about the importance of CO2 and CO2 tolerance. So, okay, this is kind of interesting. When you go and you have your blood sugar checked, they're taking one snapshot of what your blood sugar is at that moment. A1C, they're looking at how much sugar is still attached to the hemoglobin, and that way they can get a snapshot of a longer term what your blood sugar has been over a longer term, right? You're familiar with that? Okay. Your hemoglobin, in addition to carrying sugar to the cells, it also carries oxygen to the cells. So as your blood goes through, passes through your lungs, the alveoli, they convert the oxygen in the air, they put it into your blood cells, into the hemoglobin. And then as your blood is circulating through your body, the hemoglobin is supposed to take that oxygen and give it to each of the cells. Every cell is supposed to get it, right? But similar to how insulin, in a way, insulin unlocks the cell to let the blood sugar leave the hemoglobin and go into the cell. Carbon dioxide unlocks the cell and lets oxygen go in. If you don't have enough carbon dioxide, you're not going to get as good of a transfer from the hemoglobin, from the oxygen from the hemoglobin into the cells. So when you're very low on carbon dioxide, you're not actually getting as much oxygen transfer into those cells. So when we look at oxygen, kind of typical or healthy oxygen saturation is going to be 96 to 98% in your blood, right? But that doesn't tell you how much oxygen is getting into your cells. So the whole Buteyko method that Patrick McEwen talks about is about increasing your carbon dioxide tolerance. So your brainstem, like if you hold your breath, especially when you exhale and hold your breath so you don't have any air in your lungs, you're going to start to feel fairly quickly, if you haven't been working on this or training, this urge to breathe. It's like, I've got to breathe, I got to breathe. The reason why is because your CO2 levels have built up. You're not breathing, you're not exhaling CO2. So your CO2 level builds up and up and up, and it's telling your brainstem, hey, I've got to breathe. And so that's when you gasp for breath. So the higher you can get your CO2 tolerance, the more oxygen is actually going from your hemoglobin, from your blood into your cells. You're actually getting more oxygen into your cells by having a higher CO2 level in your blood. So they seem like they're opposed to each other, the Wim Hof method and the Patrick McEwen method, right? Or the Buteyko method. But I like to do both of them. And so I stress my body intentionally with the Wim Hof method. But then throughout the rest of the day, my methodology is nasal breathing. When you breathe through your nose, you're actually producing your own nitric oxide. I don't know if you've done much research on nitric oxide. That's one of your body's first lines of defense against disease, against sickness, and
Hmm. Hmm.
it accumulates in your nasal cavities. So when you breathe through your nose, you're actually breathing more nitric oxide into your system than if you're mouth breathing all the time. They've done a lot of studies on nasal breathing versus mouth breathing, and nasal wins every time. Every night when I go to bed, I put tape over my mouth so I breathe through my nose. And it wasn't long before I started that I had such bad allergies and congestion all the time that I could hardly breathe through my nose. But utilizing these methods, I've been able to clear my nose, and now every night I tape my mouth and I breathe just through my nose all night long. There's other little techniques that you can do. So like when I'm driving to an appointment or to work or anything along those lines, I'm focusing on slow, deep breathing. And so my whole goal is to slow down my respiratory rate. And similar to having a lower heart rate is almost always good if you don't have like bradycardia and you don't have other symptoms of problems with that. I think most people would agree having a lower heart rate is a good thing. Same thing is true for your respiratory rate. If you're breathing over 20 breaths per minute, you are in a chronic state of anxiety and stress and panic. And that's when panic attacks start to happen. A healthy breath rate is going to generally be between 10 and 15 breaths per minute. And you can train your body to do that.
So, okay, so we've talked about the breath side of things. Is there anything else in that area you want to share before we maybe go into a couple other questions?
Well, so that breath work is only one of the three methods that I.
Okay. What are the others?
So the other is, like I said, futurescaping. That's kind of learning how to become who you want to become, how to envision that, right? In other words, do you know how much money is spent in the United States alone on advertising?
Total?
Yeah, every year
Trillion dollars? I don't know.
it's between 400 and 450 billion dollars, and that's just on actual, like, you're talking ads and billboards and like, but then on top of that, you have all the different social media algorithms. You've got unpaid advertising. Like, if I don't want to get into all of the politics, right? But if you look at any like Disney show or anything like that, what are you going to see? You're going to see the parents are made to look like idiots, and the kids, right? Like there's this programming that is going on that's not paid for as well, and that's probably more pervasive. You've got the social media algorithms, you've got AI. If you think you're in control of your own thoughts and you're just like living your own life, you are not in control of your thoughts. If you're not intentionally directing your own programming, you are being brainwashed. So for me, the futurescaping is basically saying, well, if I'm going to be brainwashed, I want to control my brainwashing, and I'm going to brainwash myself to be the person that I want to be, right? And there's some methodology there, journaling and different things that I teach on how to futurescape. And then meditation is huge for that. Have you heard of Joe Dispenza? Does that name ring a
No,
bell?
you're giving me all these new names. No, huh? No.
So Joe Dispenza, he wrote the first book of his that I read was called "You Are the Placebo," which really resonated with me. There's studies that have been done that talk about the power of placebo and psychosomatic healing and disease and all of that. He references this doctor back in World War II who had run out of morphine, and so he told his nurses to fill the morphine bottles with saline solution. and he had soldiers coming in and he was having to operate on their legs, like dig in and pull nerves out and reconnect stuff and extremely painful stuff. And he had the nurses bring out saline solution, but it was in the morphine bottle and in front of the patient, take the syringe and pull out the morphine, which was nothing more than saline solution, inject the patient, and he would start cutting. And that patient, as soon as they got nothing more than saline solution, they would relax, and he would start operating on their leg, and they wouldn't feel a thing. The mind, the power of the
Wow.
mind is incredible, and it's hard to get into this realm without sounding all woo, right? But like quantum physics, they've shown now. So the Newtonian version of the atom, you have the nucleus and then the electron going in orbit around the nucleus, almost like the planets orbit the sun, right? But they changed that. They realized that that's not how it actually works. Back in the around the time of Einstein, they were doing these studies where they would, wherever they would look for the electron, all of a sudden the electron would appear, and it changed. Now you have quantum physics. It's a completely different way of viewing the entire universe, but a lot of people don't get it still, and it still sounds very woo. It's very scientific, but a lot of people have a hard time grasping that. What I learned with meditation in particular, so do you know what it means by definition, what it means to meditate?
Not really. Not the pure answer.
By definition, meditation means to become familiar with. So when we meditate, we're often, the way most people meditate is, okay, quiet your mind and just be aware of what's going on right now. Mindfulness. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, meditation is primarily a tool for me to become familiar with my future self, who I'm striving to become, who I want to become. And the reason why I think of have you ever had an experience, Paul, where you're really trying to be, let's say, more compassionate or patient or something like that? And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you may not recognize that there's been any external stimulus, but all of a sudden you just say like a rude comment to somebody, or you cut somebody off, or something happens, and all of a sudden you're in a state of conflict. Have you ever had that happen before? I think we,
Many times, yes, actually, many times, yeah.
I think we all have, right? And you have to ask, like, why is that? Well, it's because your subconscious is not in line with who you're striving to be yet, right? And so when you meditate on who you want to be, you start to raise your subconscious level to that plane, to that person. And now subconsciously you're going to start behaving like that as the rule. There's a really good book I'd recommend for you and for all your readers. It's called The Ant and the Elephant. It's a very short book, and it's a allegory. It's a kind of like a parable, and it talks about this ant who's on an elephant. He doesn't realize he's on an elephant, but this ant is trying to walk this direction. And no matter how fast that ant can run, if the elephant is going this direction, the ant is ultimately going this direction, even though the ant is trying to walk this way. And so the point of this book is your subconscious mind is the elephant and your conscious mind is the ant. And so what you really need to do if you want to go somewhere is you need to train the elephant, your subconscious mind, to go in that direction. And then you're going to start gravitating that way by naturally. So that's what meditation is
Yeah.
all.
Does that relate to the reticular activation system in our brain then? Is that have something to do with that?
I'm not I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I'm sure it does. Can you clarify what do you mean by that? I know I've heard of the reticular
Well,
I can't even speak it. Reticular, I stutter a little bit when I.
activation is a reticular activation system, which they call RAS, and so essentially the way I understand it is, so if you think about your vision, your hearing, your senses of all your body, temperature, everything, there's millions and millions of pieces of data coming into your body,
Mhm.
right, into your brain, into your system. So how could you possibly function if you were trying to be aware of everything going on, right?
Sure.
So the idea being that your reticular activator, which is a mysterious part of the brain, focuses on typically, I believe it's 3 to 4 things at once. Okay, so if you're driving, you can't be worrying too much about the kids in the back and what's going on with the waterfall fountain over here and all this kind of stuff. You're focusing on that one thing, right?
Yes.
It's and a similar thing that they talk about is let's say you went out and you bought a Tesla, okay? And now everywhere you look, you're going to see a Tesla, okay?
Absolutely.
Because you've got one. So that's, and suddenly you're going, wow, everybody suddenly bought a Tesla, And so that's the idea is that the focus, you can't possibly focus on everything, but it's a fundamental thing that's why, and we talk about difference between men and women. Typically, in right brain, left brain, men are typically like freight trains. We just one thing, we're made to jump in a tank and start shooting stuff or something, and so, and women are a little different that way, but they see things. A friend of mine said a veil of emotions, kind of they focus on different things, but it's by design, as we know. But anyway, long story short is, so there's a complexity there, but also a simplification that, okay, when you're looking at your vision or something that you're talking about, where do I want to be? You make that your focus, right? That has to be meditating on, and meaning that you're bringing it into a deeper thing or a deeper place in your world. Scrolling through your phone is not going to be good meditation, is it?
No, and
Not really. No. Yeah. Go ahead.
so yeah, I had heard reticular activation system. I had heard that before. I wasn't quite familiar, but as you're describing it, 100% yes. It is exactly that. So we process enormous amounts of information, but what we become conscious of, what we're aware of, is very, very small amounts of it. Think of it like this. You are in sales, you're in business. Anyone who's in business is in sales, right? You've
Right.
run into people who have tried to sell you something, a service, and you just don't have a good feeling about that person. Like, we have receptors, we have, as people, just like animals, we release pheromones, chemicals, our smells, the tone of our voice. There's so many different subtle things that if we tried to control all of those in ourselves, like we would never be able to, ever. And when we're dealing with people or people are dealing with us, they have receptors, they perceive all of those, but they're not consciously aware of everything that they're perceiving. Even if they've gone to school, to get tons and tons of training, like these people who study body language and all of these kind of things, there are so many more millions of pieces of data that they're just not able to consciously process. And so, yes, when you become who you're supposed to be, I was explaining this in one of the networking Navy groups, and somebody said, "Oh, it's like fake it till you make it." And I said, "Yeah, I guess it could be. You could describe it as fake it till you make it, but it's only faking it if that's not who you really are going to become. If you're really going to become that person, it's no longer fake it till you make it. It's faith it till you make it. Right? You are becoming the type of person who can land these high value deals and whatever it is that you're wanting to do, you're becoming the type of person that does those things. And this methodology, futurescaping, utilizing breath work to manage your state, right? To get out of the sympathetic and into the parasympathetic, where you can recover and fully become and embody that person. And then meditating, where you become familiar with it. It's one thing to like dream about the future, but when you actually get in deep into a meditation, you actually feel that in here. You're talking about your five senses, right? That that future you, that future state can, and I've experienced this, it can become more real than your current five senses. And what happens is you train your body, you train every cell. Joe Dispenza talks about the subconscious mind, and he says that your body is the subconscious mind. And at first I didn't quite understand it, but then I started realizing, let's say that I am an angry person most of the time. Well, what happens when I'm angry is I'm producing cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine, like these chemicals of anger. I'm not producing a lot of oxytocin and serotonin and the feel good chemicals. I'm producing these chemicals that are negative. And that's what I'm giving all of the cells in my body. Well, the cells in my body, they don't judge that whether it's good or bad. They're like, well, this is what I need to survive because this is what I'm always having. So if I try and change my methodology and I say I'm not going to be an angry person anymore, I'm going to start being kind and loving. My body is going to say, whoa, 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 where's the cortisol here? You're starving me. I need my cortisol. I need my adrenaline. I need my epinephrine. And that's why you start to behave angrily again, because your body, as the subconscious mind, is sending all these signals up through your whole nervous system, telling your brain, hey, I need my cortisol. Give me my cortisol hit. You start to go through withdrawal. So when you meditate and you meditate properly and you really get into that state where you start to train your body, you start to teach your body what it feels like to be grateful, to have joy, to be loving. All of a sudden, your body starts to become familiar with those emotions. And then when you find yourself in a situation where you would normally react in anger, your body, instead of sending anger signals up to your brain, it's going to say, hey, I need more gratitude. I need more love. I need more joy. And without even thinking about it, you're going to start forgiving someone naturally. You're going to start feeling grateful naturally. You're going to start making a list of the things that you're grateful for in that moment. So when somebody cuts you off in traffic, rather than giving them the finger and honking and like getting into road rage, you can say, wow, like I almost had an accident here. I could have I very likely could have had an accident. How wonderful is it that I was safe and protected? And it's a whole mindset shift.
That's a big difference.
Yeah,
It's definitely a big difference.
absolutely.
So, what for our listeners to know to get started on this, and this has been fantastic to engage with you in this process? What do you have for? Do you have a starter like interview that they need to go through, or evaluation kind of thing? Where do you start? Where do you start with somebody?
Yeah, so a great place would be just to reach out and we can do an interview. Absolutely, we can do a discovery call or however you want to frame it. I'm also very quickly here within the next week or two. I'm going to start teaching classes. I'm going to do a morning breathwork class where it'll be an hour long class, and we'll do the breath work for 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll do a meditation. It'll be a 22, 23 minute meditation, and I'm going to be doing that consistently, and anyone who wants to join will be able to join. You can follow me on social media to get the links to that. My company is called Essential Breathwork, and you can look me up, Alex Huntington, on Facebook, or you can look up Essential Breathwork on Facebook as well. And I'll be posting those breathwork classes up there. But I want to make that
Awesome, awesome. Are
free.
those going to be held? Go ahead.
I
What?
was going to say I want to make that free so people can come and join those classes as many times as they want. They can invite their friends. That's something that I'm going to be doing consistently every week.
Very good. Very good. That's awesome. Okay, so if somebody wanted to reach you, what do you have a phone number you'd give them as well?
Yeah,
Okay. Are you able to give some of this service to somebody that might be outside of our area? Can you do some things
yeah.
virtually, or is it pretty much an in-person thing?
No, I absolutely can do stuff over Zoom, and yeah, for sure.
Okay, great, great. All right, Alex, this has been very enlightening and I've enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you for
Yeah,
appearing
likewise.
on the podcast today. And I enjoyed it tremendously. Look forward to doing something like this again. And I hope you have a great day and we'll invite you back soon. Okay.
Thanks, Paul. You too.
Thank you.